If you are a new or returning player to Destiny 2 following the launch of the final shape, then this video is aimed at helping you get familiarised with some of the foundations of the game, which can be a little overwhelming with all the changes over the years, even for returning Guardians. Bungie have done a great deal to make the game accessible to everyone, but it still involves multiple layers of interconnecting game mechanics, which sometimes people aren't even aware of as they're playing. I've seen a lot of friends and new players enjoying the game now, but often struggling with core systems that aren't necessarily clearly explained by the game. The final shape has done a fantastic job of reinvigorating Destiny 2 as well as overhauling a lot of the in-game mechanics, and added a lot of new content with a fantastic campaign, new destinations and activities, new subclasses and abilities, and there's never been a better time to dive back in. Destiny is a massively in-depth game for both casual and hardcore players alike, and I promise you that after a short while the in-game systems become second nature and the game becomes massively rewarding. I've been playing the game on and off ever since Destiny 1, but I'm no expert by any means, and honestly just making this video feels like a slightly daunting task, so if there are any veteran Guardians out there with additional tips and advice, your constructive input is very welcome of course. I'm going to split these videos up for different elements of the game because there's just too much to cover in one video. I'll split this video into chapters so you can find the parts that are most applicable to you. I will try and be clear and concise as possible, and I'll also try and share some helpful tools at the end of the video that I use, which can make building and managing your Guardian's armor, weapons and abilities much easier. With all that being said, let's have a look at the role your armor plays for your Guardian, and we can't do that without first having a look at your character stats. Going to the character screen, you'll see a column of numbers just to the right of your character. You can hover over each of these for a brief summary of what they are. At the very top, in big bold numbers, you have your power level, sometimes referred to as your light level because that's what it used to be called. Now, this number is important because ultimately you want to get this as high as possible, but there are many equally important things you want to get done along the way. Next, you have this number here, which is your Guardian rank. This number doesn't affect your character stats, but it is a soft indicator to other players of how experienced you may or may not be, and this will grow depending on what activities you complete in the game, but isn't important for what we're discussing today. The important numbers here are in this column, which are your character stats. These are the things which can directly influence your gameplay alongside your power level. There are many different parts of the game which will influence these numbers up or down, including your subclass, your weapons, in-game buffs or debuffs, and at the very foundation what we're going to focus on today is your armor. So firstly, just to explain what each of these do. Mobility will affect your movement speed and jumping height. Resilience will increase your shield strength and how much damage you can take. Recovery determines how quickly you regenerate health. Discipline determines how quickly you regenerate your grenades after you've used them. Intellect determines how quickly your super charges up. And finally, strength determines how quickly your melee ability regenerates. Each character stat is broken up into tiers, which is important to understand because if I hover over my mobility here, for example, you'll see my mobility is currently at 32 and is in tier 3. What that means is that if my mobility number is anywhere between 30 to 39, my mobility tier will always be 3. If my mobility stat goes down to 29, it will be tier 2, or up to 40, it will be tier 4. Just to hopefully clarify this, I'm going to modify one of my pieces of armor just slightly to illustrate. Pay attention to my mobility and also my resilience numbers here, currently tier 3 and tier 10 respectively. Now when I swap my resilience mod for a mobility mod, and don't worry, I will go over mods in a little more detail shortly, you'll see my mobility stat has gone up to 42, and I'm now in tier 4, and I'll move a little faster and jump a little higher. And my resilience has dropped from 103 to 93, and I'm now in tier 9, meaning I'll have a little less shields and damage will hurt me a bit more. I want to stress there is no right or wrong way to enjoy this game. There is no right or wrong way with regards to what these numbers should be, but what I can do is make some recommendations for things to work towards long term as you approach higher level content for endgame activities such as legendary missions, dungeons, nightfalls and raids for example. It can feel like you're trying to wrestle a bag of snakes, but the two character stats I recommend people get as high as possible regardless of class are firstly resilience and then recovery, ideally at just over 100 to reach tier 10. It will just mean you can take more damage and recover faster. It will not make you invincible. If you can't achieve those numbers yet, don't worry, that's entirely normal. None of the things I'm showing you right now need to be done all at once. Increasing the power of your Guardian is a journey one step at a time. Please note, every stat is capped at 100, so if you can reach 100 or just above, that's fantastic. But just for argument's sake, say that I can reach a character stat of 150 resilience or even 300 resilience, all of those numbers will be wasted as my resilience will still only be performing at tier 10 regardless. Like I said before, these character stats are a combination of different things within the game, but armor is always the foundation. So to demonstrate, I'm just going to show you now quickly how just swapping one piece of armor can change all of these stats by swapping my chest piece. So I want you to focus on the character stats and ignore the power level for now. You'll see all the character stats were changing as I changed my armor. The corresponding armor stats ultimately feed your character stats. So how on earth do you determine what makes a good piece of armor? Firstly, there are 3 different grades of armor. Firstly, blues, which are usually just used to upgrade other pieces of armor, but are also fine to equip for early spells of the game, just to save on materials and get by. Then there's legendary, which has a purple background, which generally have better armor stats. And then there's exotics, which will also give you enhanced abilities, and these have a bright yellow background. More on exotics later, as there have been some additional changes on that front with the final shape. New armor and weapons will drop from the game from every activity. You will constantly be getting new gear, but with a limited amount of inventory space and vault space, how do you decide what to keep, what to use for upgrades, and what to just simply dismantle? The first thing I check for on any new piece of armor is the armor total, which is this number here, and it's simply all the armor stats added together. As a general rule, I'd suggest for new players who feel ready to focus on this more and don't want to clog up their vaults, that they keep an eye out initially for armor items with a total of 55 or higher. As your builds get stronger and you get better loot, you can start focusing on getting armor with a 65 or higher total. The higher your armor totals, the more flexibility you have in determining your character stats and ultimately your playstyle. Higher level activities give you a better chance of getting loot with higher armor total. It's important to understand here that when determining which armor pieces you want to keep and save and use for your builds, armor total is much more important than power level. Your armor total is fixed, whereas you can easily use other pieces of gear to increase the power level. This is called infusing, and I'll just demonstrate that quickly now. So I've got an armor piece here with a decent armor total, but the power level is low. So now I've got this piece here, which has a rubbish armor total and a decent power level. I go to the piece I want to upgrade, hover the cursor over the infusion box, select the piece I'm going to infuse, and now I've infused the power level from that armor piece into the armor I want to keep. General rule of thumb, high armor total plus low power score equals keep. Low armor total plus high power score equals save to infuse. Low armor total plus low power score equals dismantle for materials. And finally, high armor total plus high power score equals absolutely save and keep for future use or equip right now. So now I've got a good armor piece with a good armor total and a good power level. To make sure I don't accidentally dismantle or infuse that into anything else, here's a quick tip. You can quickly click right stick to lock that piece of gear, and you can do that with all your favorite weapons and armor in the game. Obviously, you'll need to find the respective controls on your respective platform. There are some useful things you can do to give yourself the best chance of getting the armor you want. The first one is kind of a strange quirk. If you go to your ghost, you can add modifiers here which will influence your loot table, meaning you can influence the statistics of what drops. And if you look at the third slot here, I've got a discipline mod, and if you want to change that, you can swap that for intellect, mobility, recovery, resilience, or strength. But why do I have mine equipped for discipline? This is the quirk. Because the two main stats I'm always looking for in armor are resilience and recovery, if I equip a discipline mod, because of the way the game's set up, I will always get a high discipline stat, and I will always get either a high resilience or recovery stat too. It's just the way it's been coded. Every now and then, if I feel like I need to boost my mobility, for example, I will change that for a mobility mod and hopefully give myself some options there. Change it for what you need. The other thing you can do if you have access to seasonal content, for example, which is always found on the helm here, is armor focusing. And armor focusing is good because generally armor will drop with armor totals of low 60s up to high 60s. Right there in the middle, you'll see it says focusing with a high discipline stat due to equipped ghost mod. Right now, I just don't have access to this yet because I haven't progressed the mission, but soon enough I'll be able to start using it. Once you've got an armor piece you know you'll definitely want to use, you'll want to optimize it. So I'm just going to cover the energy score and Masterwork. You'll see all my armor I've currently got equipped is Masterworked, indicated by the yellow border, and it also gives me a little stat. So let me grab a piece of armor I want to Masterwork. I'll use these legs as an example. You'll see at the top there it says 1 energy next to the power level and above the armor stat. And when I look at the details and look at this bar here, I can increase the energy level. The energy level determines how many mods you can use on any one piece of armor. And initially you want to aim for at least 4 because this will allow you to equip any choice of general armor mods. There is a materials cost associated when upgrading energy and masterworking armor, especially exotic armor, so just make sure it's definitely a piece you're going to use right away, otherwise just tuck it in the vault for safekeeping. So let's upgrade this now. We'll get that up to 4. And now, for example, I can equip a resilience mod, which will add an extra 10 resilience stat points to this armor. Now, if I want to masterwork this piece, what that means is increasing the energy level to 10. This will allow me to add additional mods. I will go over weapon and armor modifiers in more detail in another video. Masterworking will also very nicely give me some extra stat points, but I also want you to be aware the higher you go, the higher the cost. So you can see I can now add extra modifiers. And my stats have also been bumped up by 12 points, plus 2 per stat, and we now get this lovely gold border. This piece has been masterworked and is ready for use. Typically on legendary armor you will only get 4 mods, but it is possible to find in certain events like raids and dungeons, for example, armor that has a 5th extra mod slot like this one. Don't worry too much about that for now. Let's talk about exotics. There are some key changes to the way exotic armor works in the final shape. Exotic armor is a little different because your priority above anything else is to make use of the exotic armor perk, which you can see here on my Celestial Nighthawk, meaning the armor total takes second priority for exotics, not first. When you start finding multiple copies of a piece of exotic armor, like my Knucklehead radars here for example, then you can start being more selective. So one of the changes is that all exotic armor pieces when masterworked will now become what we call artifice armor. And when people talk about artifice armor, they mean armor with an extra mod slot, which I can show you here. It just adds some extra flexibility and stats to your builds and is very nice to have, but don't worry if you don't have that yet. Masterworking exotics does have a higher material cost, so please be mindful of that. Your class item is the 5th slot for your armor, so on hunters it's the cloak, on titans it's the mark, and on warlocks it's the bond. Class items don't inherently add any character stats until they're masterworked, so it's important to factor these into your builds because again you can add a whole selection of modifiers, as you can see here, plus the stat bump. So just a quick note on materials, you will get materials from completing activities, loot chests around the star system, dismantling unwanted gear, but there are also some places you can go where you can stock up when necessary, and some things you can do to get certain items to drop more frequently. I'll show you in the inventory what you're going to need, which is glimmer, upgrade modules, enhancement cores, enhancement prisms, and ascendant shards. Firstly, on your ghost, there are additional modifiers depending on what you want to chase for cores, prisms, and upgrade modules. If you visit the tower, you can go to the gunsmith or Ada 1 to purchase an upgrade module.
Hello again.
The Cryptarch has a good selection of materials too available for purchase, but beware the cost, as you may end up in a loop as purchasing prisms costs cores and vice versa. Just think of it as a trade-off depending on what gear you need at any given time. You get rewards from all the vendors eventually that can help, and the best thing of course is just to have it all drop for you as part of your loot. Of course, this is all well and good, but you also want to look the part, so if you come down here on your character screen, you can customize your look, and I'll let you play around with that. Finally, as promised, I'm going to point you in the direction of a couple websites and apps that I find very useful to manage all of this smoothly. Not sponsored or paid in any way by either one, you don't have to use these at all, but if you want to go more in depth and really optimize your builds in the long term, then I definitely recommend these for your consideration. I know we've covered an awful lot there already, but hopefully now that you've familiarized yourself with some more of the game mechanics and you're starting to gain a deeper understanding of the game, you'll find it more and more rewarding as you carve out your own path as a Guardian. Just a reminder, don't worry if you don't have a fully optimized build like this one for example with multiple maximized character stats. I ran the entire legendary campaign on this build, which looks less pretty by the numbers. You just have to remember that as a Guardian, you are still essentially an ass-kicking warrior space god. I hope you found this useful and informative and will help you enjoy the game more. Let me know if you have questions or specific topics you want me to cover in more detail. A like and subscribe is all I'll ever ask of you in return. Eyes up, Guardian, stay frosty, be good to each other. I'll catch you on the next one.